What's going on, guys? Good morning, good evening, whichever time it is. Well, thank you yet for another tutorial that we're going to be dealing with on your HTML, CSS, PHP, JavaScript login. Now, today's session is going to be a little bit different in the aspect that, yes, in as much as we're still continuing on with our tutorial for how to sign up into a system, I want to touch on two little aspects that are very important in dealing with PHP. First and foremost, I want us to deal with something that is known as sessions, and secondly, I want us to deal with something that is known as I want us to deal with something called sessions. So let me say number 5, sessions, which deal with cookies and so forth. But I also want us to deal with something called include statements that are used in PHP. So the reason why I'm mentioning this is because they play a very pivotal role when it comes to how our information is viewed. In our last tutorial, you were able to realize that we could be able to log in into our system. So pretty much, if you remember this, let me reopen the page. Localhost. We had this as our nice sign up form, but then sessions keep track of data of who's logged in onto the system. So a very good example is, imagine that you're logged in onto a system, but as you're logged in on a system, certain information has to be used. So for us to be able to manipulate sessions and cookies, now we're going to utilize two files, whereby on the first set of file we're going to be able to set the file, and on the second set of file we're going to be able to view the file. So for that to happen is still in our very same folder. We're just going to create a new file. Let's call this set.php, and we're also going to use another one. Let's call it view.php. So as that is happening, how then do we manipulate this? We add our PHP tags on both files. So imagine every time you're on a website or you're logged in on a system, your system needs to keep track of who's on the system. So imagine that, alright, you've got maybe an ID, you've got a name, you've got some information that you've stored, and this is within, let's say, the database. So within the database, let's say my ID is 1, and my name is Ghost, and I've got certain information, blah 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 over here, but I'm not the only user, so it means that there is two or second user whose Craig, whose information is what, da 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 da. So how then do we keep track of, alright, at this point in time it is Ghost who's logged in, or at this point in time it is Craig who's logged in? We make use of what you call sessions, because sessions keep track of information that is being used in what you call a cookie. So pretty much a cookie is stored information. So every time the cookie is being ran, or when the session is being started, let's say ID number Craig is the one who's logged in, the cookie will store that no, it is Craig who's logged in with this certain information that is running. So then, moving on further, whenever you're setting a session, you need to understand that there is certain code or certain syntax that is to start. As you all know, your code runs from what you call a top-bottom page. So we should be able to set our data over here, and we should be able to view the data over here. So for us to set our data, we need to use the session command statement. Now this session command statement will allow you to be able to run the session, but you start by the keyword session _ start. Now this is a function in PHP that keeps information. If you put information in between the first header tag, the first tag, and the session start, whatever that you're going to put here, the information will not be read, or it won't be understood. But whatever is going to be following after the session start keyword, it is going to be stored. So as you all know, session start, then we create a variable that is known as what? Session. And this is not just an ordinary variable, it's more of an array of a variable. So square braces, and let's say our session has got the keyword user name. And for argument's sake, let's just say the information inside our username is the person on our number one, who's what? Ghost. So in other words, we've started a session whereby this session utilizes the username, and the username is Ghost. Later on, we are going to modify this code that this statement will be coming in from the database. Remember, we were able to have a session, we were able to have a sign-up system whereby someone was able to log to sign up. So whatever name that they would have used here, imagine it now being the name that is going to be what? That is going to be over here. So you started your session, you said our session's name is called what? It's called Ghost. So setting a session is one thing. Now the next concept now is, how then do we get to view the session? Because the session has to be viewed one way or the other. Let me erase this and then show you. So take a look at this. On our view.php we currently have nothing, but on our set.php we currently have some information. If we are to come back to our browser and we actually use the view.php statement, you will see that the statement is what? Or the page is empty. But then we want our information to be able to be set, and for you to be able to set the information, the page has to be ran before anything happens. So we go back onto our code. Now it's time for us to call this statement inside the view. Now PHP utilizes what you call mainly include statements, which are statements that allow certain pages to have access to certain information on different pages. So imagine things like what you call classes, a class having a class to a what? To a different page. So in PHP you utilize a keyword called include statement, and you include the name of the document that you want to be able to what? To view. So include set.php. Right? After including the set.php, it now means that this view.php page will have access to set.php page. So picture it as more of what you can say, or picture it as more of what we can call like a function call or a class what? Class call. Right? Now once that is done, you realize that this page view will have certain access to this page. Are we together? Now how then do we go about it to make sure that this information is visible? Now remember what I said, you still need to have access to this page, but you still need to start a session. So session start, you can now remove your view because you won't need it, because you're going to use the function call session start, and you can just print out the name of your session. And what's the name of our session? Over here the name of our session is this variable, like that. So if we go back on our page and still view, you will still say, it will say this. But what will happen now is, what if we run the set.php so that it sets a session? Now the session has been set, the page is blank. So how then do we view it? Localhost view.php, and it will give out the name what? Ghost. It didn't bring out anything else except the username that is stored on what? On Ghost. Now we are talking about a login system. Imagine that we want to make sure that whoever is on the current page has access or is logged in on a system. We can now get to utilize what you can call, or what you can define as an if statement, because this if statement will allow your work to be able to be what? To be recognized. So Alright, our session name is utilizing the username, or say username, and the name is what? Is ghost. Pretty much for now it's implicitly put, but then this next time it is going to be this information coming from a database. So over here we're no longer just going to say echo out the statement. We can now utilize an if statement. So we can now say if, and we utilize what is known as an isSet function. So if isSet, what is set exactly? What is set is we are trying to check if this exists. So if isSet, which is a function of its own, and it requires its own brackets like that. So if isSet, whatever is going to be happening if this session is in existence is going to be done where? Or let's say when logged in, information is going to be done here. Otherwise, if the information is not set, then we can just say echo a statement that says, let's say, please login. Now currently on this one we don't have any information yet that determines if the user is logged in or not, but now what we can do is we can just add a basic statement that says echo, and then we maybe give out a statement to say welcome. And who are we welcoming? We're welcoming whoever is going to be logged in on the system. So where is their name stored? Their name is still stored under this session. So it's welcome. And then we concatenate, or we combine with $_ session, right? And the what? The username. Like that. So for you to see how this is going to work out, I'm going to change this to Craig, then save. Then I'm going to come back over here on view.php, refresh. You see it says welcome ghost, of which our session is not welcome ghost. Now if we are to rerun this set.php page, localhost set.php, it gives us blank information. But if we are to run the view.php, it will say welcome Craig. So you realize that without this information someone won't be able to what? To run. Now I'm going to close off all my tabs, restart them, and then show you what's going to be happening. My Chrome, I'm just going to go for localhost and just go to the view page. It says please log in. Why? Because there is no session that was started. There is no one who had logged in. Now what would happen now is if we run the localhost again, but then this time with the set.php, which means that the session has started. In other words, the user has logged in, which is this session whereby the name is Craig and the user has logged in. Now for us to be able to make sure that it won't say this, we refresh, it says welcome Craig. Thank you yet for another tutorial. I'll meet you guys on our next session, which talks about include statements and how to sign out or how to close sessions.